Hi there. My name is Kendra Tolbert. I'm a registered dietitian and yoga teacher specializing in PCOS and fertility. And today I have a very special guest with me, Sarika Shah. Just going to give you a bit of background and then she's going to hop right in and tell us a bit about herself. The reason I invited her on is because about 50% of my subscribers on YouTube are from India, and I've had a few people reach out and request information that's specific to the Indian culture. And that's not my culture as much as I adore it and honor it and respect it. It's not mine, so I can't really speak to it from a place of authority. But we have someone who absolutely can. She's known as the Indian nutritionist on Instagram. And so, Sarika, welcome.
Thanks for having me on, Kendra. I'm honored to be on your YouTube channel and being interviewed with you. So a little bit about myself. I am of Indian heritage. I am first generation. My parents migrated to the United States, had my sister and I. So I've grown up with that challenge of balancing the Indian lifestyle along with American. And so I have a fond desire to help people like myself. I've been a dietitian for almost 20 years, so consider old school dietitian, I guess. And with times evolving, I've done anything from acute care, which is clinical experience in the hospital, if someone has surgery or feeding tubes, to long-term care, where someone goes to rehab and recover. And so with that, along that time, I also got to teach at a university level, which I absolutely enjoyed. And then going from there, life happened. I'm a mom of two and decided I need to step back a little bit on my career, so I could be a mom and be more present raising my family, in which I find joy in as well. So I always tell my clients I'm a mom first, family comes first, and then my clients come second, or my career comes second from that perspective. And so I joined a private practice a year out of my early retirement, I guess. So I only took about a year break. And that's when I got to niche down on what I truly like and what I'm passionate about. And there's a whole new world of being in private practice where you get to make your own rules, you get to spend as much time as you want with your clients, and you really get to help the way you want without time or constraints or regulations or someone telling you what is right and what is wrong. And when I went into private practice, I think because I look like my clientele and I understand my clientele, they kind of flocked to me, and I said, all right, this is what I really am passionate about. And so I took advantage of it and started applying it to Instagram.
Oh, I love that. I love that so, so much. So if we back up a little bit, how did you get involved in nutrition to begin with?
Oh, that's a good story. I'm going to keep it short. I, as a typical Desi, typical Indian person, I went to college because you don't have a choice. You go to college. It's what you do. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. We make the decision so young here in the United States as to what you're going to major in and what it is. And you kind of have to nail that down when you apply. Because I didn't know, I went down the path of engineering, because that's what Indians do. You're an engineer, doctor, or a lawyer. So I went into engineering. And then my first year of undergrad, you take some general education classes. And the first one was nutrition. And I had no idea this even existed. Kudos to my family, never bringing up the importance of nutrition or bad-mouthing food. So I didn't know that this other world existed. And then my dad and I were returning back from India on a flight. He said, Dad, I'm changing my major to nutrition. Broke it to him and told him, and he was completely supportive. So that's one reason. And then I stuck to it. There's a second reason is my sister was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis while I was in undergrad and she was in high school. And that's where it solidified it for me 100% as to why I'm doing this. We still eat cultural foods. I'm Gujarati, so we ate traditional Gujarati food Sunday through Thursday every night. Fun nights were non-Indians were Friday and Saturday nights. And so knowing that, and she had ulcerative colitis, and as you and I know, diet plays an important part on that inflammation and healing. And so any dietitian she met was not able to help. because of the lack of education and unawareness of our diet and our culture and what things are plated for us and how they can help. So that solidified it for me.
Love it. Okay. So some of us watching might not be super familiar with the foods that would be common to the Indian culture. Can you share what those foods are?
Yeah. So I will preface it with, depending on where you are from India, the foods vary and the way we plate them and the way we cook them. But it doesn't change what is really the key ingredients. Diets are really high in lentils and beans. Rice, the basmati rice is a key ingredient. Vegetables. When you live in India, you have access to fresh vegetables, and you cut them and there's no big refrigerators. And so you get everything fresh daily and you eat. And then yogurt. Most Indians make their yogurt at home. And it's great. There's so many benefits to it. So the staples definitely are lentils, beans, rice, vegetables, yogurt. And then of course there is a form of bread that is used. So it can be like a chapati, a roti, a paratha, a dosa. I mean, there's various forms of the so-called bread. Those can be often made of different flours, which I feel like the US is just starting to embrace some of these flours that are traditional in the Indian culture, which are like chickpea flour, or almond flour, or oat flour, whole wheat. So some of that is traditional. Did I answer your question?
Absolutely. You definitely did. Thank you so much for that. So when I'm working with someone with PCOS, I always start with balancing blood sugar. And that, to me, starts with what the plate looks like. So how would you take some of the foods that you just shared and plate them in such a way that you're creating this balanced meal that does support blood sugar balance? That's so important for PCOS.
Yeah. So I believe blood sugar balance is actually, I want to say, a universal importance. As being Indian, and many of your followers may know, we're at higher risk for diabetes, heart disease, like syndrome X, which is a metabolic syndrome X, which is huge in the United States for Asian immigrants, especially Southeast Asians. And so blood sugar balance is key as well in my processing. I also look at the plate just like you do, and I try to incorporate the same foods that they traditionally eat, but how you can, quote unquote, fortify it to some extent. And fortifying meaning not adding the fat and the calories like we use in clinical setting, but fortifying meaning how can you add into your plate to help stabilize blood sugar. And so I practice gentle nutrition. I gradually get my clients to start plating half their plate with vegetables. If you go from only having a fourth of a plate, I can't ask you to do half of a plate. So we do it slowly and incrementally. And how can you do it? You can add veggies to your yogurt. You can add extra veggies to your dals when you make them. Spinach does great inside your dal. So I try to incorporate ways that you can have your veggies. And I kind of do a rule of thumb with them as well. I say, let's go for the veggies first. Make sure you get your protein. It can be formed for those that are non-vegetarian. You can have it as fish. You can have it as chicken. Those are generally the more common meats that they may have. And for my vegetarians or my vegans, I ask them to get your soybeans or your beans or your lentils. And we have so many forms of lentils. We use red lentils, we do white lentils, we do mung beans. We have everything. We use garbanzo beans, we use the darker chickpeas. So there's a variance. And we generally don't use canned. We make our own. And so I ask them, give them tips and tricks on maybe you pressure cook them on Sunday, have them ready to go, and then they're easy to add on. And I teach them different salads that you can do with veggies and lentils as well. So you get your protein and your fiber and then fat. So I guess to answer your question, protein, fiber, fat are so key in stabilizing blood sugar. And then, of course, you've got to have your rice and your carb. You have to have a carb balance. Otherwise, you're not going to be full. You're not going to be satisfied. I think that is key. And that doesn't mean that you have a half plate of rice. We figure out who each client is slightly different and where your balance strikes. But rule of thumb, I guess, is very similar possibly to yours, is half plate veggies, a fourth protein, and a fourth a carb. And we work from that and how you can emphasize and do that. I think that's pretty much it, but it varies from client to client.
Absolutely. I feel like everything in nutrition is kind of like, it depends. It depends on who you are, how you like to eat, what's going on with your body, even what time of day it might be, like where you are in your cycle, all sorts of things.
Absolutely.
Can affect what's good and right for you in that moment.
Yeah.
So you have this wonderful kind of an Instagram infographic that I shared once where you showed how to take like a traditional plate and make it a more balanced plate. So I'll definitely make sure to share that because it was so helpful and so good. So thank you for creating.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the other thing. You actually mentioned it a little bit earlier when you were talking about your sister with inflammation. Inflammation, of course, with most conditions is an underlying cause or at least something that exacerbates people's conditions. And so I'm wondering, what sort of foods would you recommend incorporating to kind of counter inflammation?
So I think every Indian has this masala dabba, which is like a little container with all our Indian spices. And that is the gold mine. I find that I never ask anybody to get rid of it. If anything, I want them to add and use it and be gentle and use it. There's nothing wrong. I mean, that has turmeric, which has taken its influence in the United States as well. It's a beloved spice, a masala for Indians. It's in almost everything that we cook. We add that to the veggies. We add that to our dals to give it flavor, but the anti-inflammatory properties. There's cinnamon, fenugreek seeds, cumin seeds, which is methi and jeera. So I believe that those are good for inflammation. And then I'm really big on some of the nuts. I do find that almonds and walnuts are key. But I like to say that in portion. We don't just go in and get a cup full of almonds and snack on those. There's a place for it in portion sizes. And of course, and the same thing goes with walnuts. And then there's plants. I think plants is so key for inflammation. They have so much to offer to each one of us, regardless of inflammation or not. But I do find them, especially the dark fibrous greens, is what I try to emphasize with my clients.
Yeah. Beautiful. I really like the emphasis on what to add in, the things that you get to enjoy more of in order to counter inflammation rather than all the things that we've kind of been taught to be afraid of to avoid inflammation. You're taking like an active role in countering it rather than fearing that you might cause it. So it's beautiful.
Yeah. Oh, thanks.
So taking a little bit of a turn here, it feels like every culture has its own like cultural food. I hesitate to call them myths, but that's the only word I can come up with right now. So I'm wondering, what are some cultural myths around food that you'd love to bust?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you see my Instagram, I start to do a little bit of the myth busting. And I think it's important to use science to tackle what some of these beliefs are. And some of these myths come from long-standing history. They're deep-rooted into something else. And so I just like to bring it to present day. When I myth bust, I'm not knocking. I just want to make sure I don't knock on the Indian culture because there are some goods. So I like to put that out there. Some of the myths. So my biggest one is don't drink water with meals. They believe the common myth, and that I still continue to get from clients, is it will disrupt digestion when you eat. Which in fact, science does not say that. Science says, in fact, it enhances digestion. And not only that, it prevents overeating and overconsumption of meals. Especially, and I emphasize that not in the sense of promoting weight loss, but at the risk of overeating and putting yourself at risk for certain diseases that Indians or Southeast Asians are at greater risk for. And those numbers. But I like to key in on the importance of water. I think water is super important. What other one? Let me think. There's one that I posted about the influence of what you eat may affect the skin color of an infant or your embryo, and then when you give birth. And I think that's deep rooted. That's probably a whole nother conversation. But if that makes any sense. But I do definitely like to emphasize that some of those myths are not true. You can have your dairy. I think it's important, for prenatal nutrition, but it's not going to affect the skin color of your child. White foods don't make your skin fair, and there's a nutrition aspect to it. And so I like the importance. Like, they're telling you to have the dairy not because of the skin, but they want you to have the dairy because of the source of protein, the source of calcium, and the nutrients that it offers. So I like to show the positive of what the myth wants it to be. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And just based on what you've shared so far, like, I kind of get a feel that truth is a very important part of your philosophy when it comes to nutrition. But how would you describe your approach and your philosophy around nutrition?
That is definitely one. I'm not afraid to say I don't know, which I think you've recognized in my emails with conversation with you. I think science is always evolving, and I continue to try to stay abreast. I cannot stay abreast every topic. So I do my best. And for my clients, if I don't know, I will say I don't know. I have no shame in outsourcing or going to dig my answers and telling them, hey, this is what current science is saying. But I teeter that very respectfully with what cultural needs are. I'm never going to take away food. I'm all about adding in. What can you add? What can you add? What can you add? Because I don't think there's ever any foods that are off limit unless they're, moldy, expired, or truly cause pain. Or you're allergic. So I will never take away food. I will only ask you to add. And it's based on truth. And that's kind of how I feel. That's really how I guess all these years have come back to made me practice.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. I love that philosophy. It definitely aligns with the way I choose to approach nutrition around PCOS. There's a lot of myths around what people can and can't eat with PCOS. And I think to a degree that has to do with the fact that there just isn't a ton of research. So people kind of do the best they can with what information they have. And so the way you approach it with what can we add more in, what can we enjoy more of, how can we make this delightful and nutritious all at the same time while still honoring that food is so much more than just nutrients. It's also a tie to our culture and to our history, and that needs to be honored, and that's so important. So
I agree with you 100%. There is much more to food than just being nutritious.
So much more. So as we wrap up, I want to ask you one slightly unrelated question. What is your favorite quote and why?
Okay, so I knew this question was coming. And somebody I truly align with just in life, philosophy-wise, is Mahatma Gandhi. I just find that he was a huge civil rights activist, a campaigner for all with dignity. And he used nonviolence as his tool, which aligns with me 100%. I'm of the religion Jainism, and Jainism's one of the pillars is nonviolence. So I just find I idolize him, and I try to live by some of the stuff that he's left behind us. And so one I really like is, you may never know what results come of your actions, but if you do nothing, there will be no results. And I think that that's applicable to everyday life. If we don't do, we won't know. And that can be applied in nutrition. It can be applied with your yoga practice. If I can't do a pose, if I don't try, I'm never going to get there, or am I not going to get better, right? And so I think that that's applicable to anything. That can even be for maybe possibly young kids that may follow you in studies, in education, or it can just be walking down the street. It's in everything and anything we do. So I really like that quote.
Thank you for that one. I'm happy you shared that. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
So as we come to a close, where can we find you about the internet so that we can learn more from you? Because you're amazing.
Oh my gosh, you're so kind, Kendra. The easiest way to find me is on Instagram. Indian.nutritionist would be the easiest way for you to find me. And from there, I have links that you can get a hold of me, email me, apply to work with me, or just use my page as a source of resource and information. Most important is getting the education and the truth out there. And if I can do that for one person, then I'm super happy.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much again for joining us today. And thank you for answering all of my questions so just gracefully and wisely. So thank you.
Oh, and thank you so much, Kendra, for having me and letting me come onto your show. I really, really appreciate this opportunity.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
All right. Well, farewell for now. And I believe I have another video coming next week. Time is a weird thing right now. So bye for now and enjoy the rest of your day.